Hey guys, tonight we're heading far, far back, long before corner bakeries, sourdough starter kits, or even those artisan rustic loaves that cost more than a Netflix subscription. You're in Australia, not the one with Wi-Fi and drive-through lattes, but a version so ancient that the land itself seems half asleep under the weight of time. Imagine opening your eyes in the outback at dawn. The horizon glows, orange dust hangs in the air like a curtain, and the only background music is the creak of insects and the distant cry of a kookaburra that apparently didn't get the memo about quiet mornings. You're hungry, and here's the first reality check. You probably won't survive this breakfast. No fridge, no oven, no recipe app telling you what temperature to set. Just a few fistfuls of wild grass seeds and a stomach that's growling louder than a kangaroo in a boxing ring. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is for you. I love picturing someone in Norway listening while the snow falls outside, while someone else in Sydney is lying under a whirring ceiling fan at midnight. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The sun is already rising faster than you'd like, spreading that golden glare across the dry land. Your feet kick up red dust with each step as you trudge away from camp. Somewhere out here is your breakfast, though at the moment it just looks like endless, wiry grass and brittle bushes. Early Australians knew this land intimately. They didn't just see weeds, they saw calories waiting to be unlocked. Grass seeds like native millet or kangaroo grass could be gathered, crushed, and transformed into something filling. That something would become the ancestor of bread long before the word bakery existed. The work is slow. You bend low, plucking seeds from the grass heads, your fingers brushing against stalks still damp with morning dew. It's tedious, sure, but think of it as the Paleolithic version of scrolling through endless TikToks, time-consuming, strangely hypnotic. But in the end, you've collected a little pile of potential. This pile doesn't look like much, just tiny specks that blow away with the slightest puff of wind. Yet hidden inside is starch, protein, even a touch of sweetness if you chew them raw. The quirky part: some archaeologists believe Aboriginal Australians may have been the world's first bakers tens of thousands of years before Egyptians started bragging about pyramids and yeast. Evidence from stone grinding tools suggests flour making here could date back 65,000 years. Think about that. Before bread became Instagrammable, it was already survival food in a land where ovens were as rare as polite emus. Historians still argue whether these seeds were really turned into bread consistently or just occasionally ground for pastes and porridges. The debates play out in dusty research papers, but here, under the blazing sun, the truth is simpler: you need to eat. Your arms ache from the bending and collecting, but you keep at it. Around you, the land hums with life. Lizards dart between rocks and echidna snuffles near an ant hill, and somewhere in the distance, smoke curls upward from a cooking fire. You know that once you've gathered enough seeds, the next step awaits: pounding and grinding. It's not glamorous. You're not about to whip up croissants or impress a Michelin chef. But this is bread in its most primal, stripped-down form. The fact that it works at all feels like a tiny miracle, one born from patience, experimentation, and the stubborn refusal of humans to let hunger win. You clutch the seeds in your hand, feeling the rough texture against your skin, and you realize this breakfast will take hours to appear, but it will also taste like history itself. And for now, that's enough to keep you going. You shuffle back toward camp seeds, spilling from your hands, tiny grains sticking to your palms as though they already know they're destined for something greater. The pile you've collected looks pitiful compared to supermarket shelves of flour bags, but here, each seed is precious. This is breakfast, lunch, and possibly dinner if you stretch it. You drop the heap onto a flat slab of sandstone, and immediately the rhythm begins. As smaller stones, smooth from years of use, fit snugly in your hand. You press it down over the seeds, dragging in circles, hearing that familiar clack scrape. It's the sound of survival, steady and almost musical. You can feel your shoulders tighten, your forearms burning from the repetition, but the sound is oddly soothing, like an ancient ASMR track recorded long before microphones existed. As the seeds break down, their shells crack, releasing a faintly nutty aroma. The powder gathers in a shallow groove, worn into the sandstone, pale and grainy. Congratulations, you've just made flour without measuring cups, sifters, or a bread machine. And you didn't even have to argue with a sourdough starter about whether it's alive. Grinding is backbreaking work, but it ties you directly to ancestors who stood in this very spot, hands dusted white, watching the powder build up little by little. Archaeologists have found grinding stones across Australia, some stained with residue from plants that no longer even grow in the region. These stones outlast people, outlast whole cultures, quietly keeping evidence of meals long gone. And here's your quirky tidbit for the night. Some grinding tools were passed down through generations like family heirlooms. Imagine that while today you might inherit grandma's teacups or a quirky porcelain figurine, back then you'd inherit a heavy slab of rock. Functional, yes, but not exactly easy to carry when moving camp. As your stone scrapes and circles, you think about how flour was more than just food. It was a store of energy, a safety net against lean times. Seeds could be gathered in abundance during certain seasons, dried and then ground when needed. In some areas, people even baked ahead, turning seeds into hard cakes that could be carried for weeks, a kind of prehistoric energy bar, though without the fancy packaging or dubious superfood claims. Historians still argue whether this grinding marked a turning point. Was it agriculture's faint whisper, the first step toward farming, or just clever foraging? After all, gathering wild seeds doesn't require planting or fences, but the repeated act of grinding, shaping and baking feels like a foreshadowing of the agricultural revolution still tens of millennia away. The air grows warmer as the sun climbs. Dust clings to your sweat. Your stomach growls again, almost mocking the slow pace of your work. You wipe your forehead with the back of your hand, leaving a smear of flour across your skin. You look like a baker already, albeit one without an apron or kitchen timer. The flour mound grows and you lean back for a moment, shaking out your sore arms. The clack of stone still echoes in your ears. Around you, life goes on. Someone tends a fire. Children chase each other barefoot, and the dry wind stirs the gum leaves overhead. This grinding is both ordinary and extraordinary, just another chore in daily life, but also a thread connecting you to the world's oldest recipes. You run your fingers through the flour. It feels rough, nothing like the silky smoothness of modern wheat flour, but you can almost imagine it as dough. Your mind skips ahead to the next step, adding water shaping, trying to make it resemble food. But for now, you keep at the grinding, the clack scrape becoming part of your heartbeat, part of the landscape's ancient rhythm. The land is harsh, yet it whispers knowledge if you listen. Grind long enough and the seeds will give you their strength. Grind long enough and hunger will finally quiet. Grind long enough and maybe, just maybe, you'll have bread tonight. Your hands ache from the grinding, but the steady rhythm has carried you into a trance. That scrape and clack of stone against stone over and over like waves lapping at the shore becomes more than a chore. It's a lullaby of survival, one that your ancestors must have hummed silently to themselves while turning raw seeds into sustenance. You pause, stretching your arms, but the sound lingers in your ears, a reminder that history is built on repetition, not dramatic gestures. The flour you've gathered isn't perfect. Bits of husk cling to it, rough flecks that will crunch between your teeth later. But it's flour enough, and that's what counts. You blow lightly, a pale cloud rising into the sunlight, dust motes, sparkling before drifting back down to the slab. If you've ever sneezed into a bag of powdered sugar, well, it's kind of like that, only here, the mess is part of the magic. Grinding stones weren't just tools, they were companions. Archaeologists find grooves worn deep, sometimes smooth as glass, from centuries of use. Imagine the countless hands that press down in this very motion. Mothers, grandmothers, children learning the trade. The grooves outlive them all, silent diaries written in stone. And here's a quirky tidbit: some stones carried so much sentimental or spiritual value that when people moved camps, they lugged these heavy slabs along. Picture yourself hiking miles through scrubland with a rock the size of a car battery tucked under your arm. Talk about dedication. That stone wasn't just kitchenware, it was a symbol of continuity, almost like a sacred bond with the land itself. The sound of your grinding carries across the camp. It's steady, reassuring. Others hear it and know food is on the way. Children might giggle at the powdery mess you're making, while elders nod approvingly at the ancient rhythm. This isn't just cooking, it's community, the heartbeat of survival. Historians still argue whether the consistency of this practice across regions points to shared traditions or independent discoveries. Did groups trade grinding techniques along songlines, or did necessity simply lead everyone to the same idea? The debate remains open, but one thing's certain: the sound of stone on stone echoes across time. You lean closer, watching as the flour builds up in the groove, and for a moment you let your imagination wander. The sound might be dull to some ears, but to you it's a soft percussion, a private concert where the instruments are rocks and patience. It's easy to picture early Australians humming along, weaving music into the grind, turning the work into ritual. You gather the flour into a small pile, brushing aside the husks. Your fingertips are dusted pale as though you've been sketching in chalk. You rub them together and marvel at how something so small, so fragile, can carry enough energy to keep you alive another day. This is bread at its starting line, silent, humble, and still waiting to be born. Your stomach reminds you not to get lost in daydreams. Hunger is impatient. You scoop the flour into a bark dish, ready for the next stage. The clack of stones quiets as you set them aside, but the echo lingers in your body. That rhythm has marked you the way a catchy tune refuses to leave your head. You stand stretching your back, feeling the pull of muscles that will ache later. You look at the flour dish, then at the fire, where smoke drifts lazily skyward. For now you've done enough grinding, the land has given its gift, and it's your turn to shape it into something edible. The rhythm may have stopped, but its memory will carry you into the next stepwater dough and the alchemy of heat. You glance down once more at the stones lying quiet now, but you know you'll hear their music again tomorrow and the next day and the day after that. In a world without clocks, without alarms, it's the clack of grinding stones that keeps time. You kneel beside the fire pit, the dish of flour resting on your lap. The stones are silent now, but your stomach isn't. It growls with a low, embarrassing complaint that would have made you blush if anyone had noticed. You scoop a handful of flour, letting it run through your fingers. It's coarse, uneven, more like sand than the fluffy white stuff you know from modern kitchens. Still, this is what you have and what you need to transform. The next step is water. You rise and walk to the creek, its surface shimmering with morning light. Dragonflies skim over the water, and tiny ripples chase each other in lazy circles. You crouch, dipping your hands into the cool stream, letting it soak your skin. It's refreshing, a brief reprieve from the dry heat pressing down on you. You fill a wooden bowl, careful not to spill, and carry it back to camp. Mixing is simple in concept, but messy in practice. You pour water slowly into the flour, stirring with your fingers, and the mixture clumps immediately. Sticky dough clings to your hands like glue, and you laugh under your breath at the mess. Forget measuring cups or precise hydration ratios. This is the wing-it, and hope for the best stage of baking. The dough is lumpy, uneven, with streaks of dry flour that refuse to blend. You knead it awkwardly, pressing and folding, listening to the wet squelch. There's something deeply satisfying about shaping food with your bare hands. Even if you look like you've lost a fight with a bucket of mud, you pat the dough into rough discs, flat and uneven, each one slightly different. They're not pretty, but nobody's handing out Michelin stars here. And here's the quirky tidbit: some groups used animal fat, even crushed bugs, to give extra binding or flavor. Yes, you heard that right. Early Australians weren't afraid to get creative. Compared to that, your simple flour and water mix feels almost elegant. Historians still argue whether these early bakers deliberately experimented with dough hydration and texture, or whether it was pure chance that produced edible results. Maybe someone left wet flour near a fire and discovered it tasted better cooked. than raw. Accidents have always been the unsung heroes of culinary history. The fire pit crackles flames dancing over charred wood. You watch the heat shimmer, thinking about how to cook this dough. No ovens, no frying pans, just earth and fire. The trick is, in the coals, you'll need to scrape aside the embers, bury the discs beneath hot ash, and hope the heat works its magic. It's a gamble every time. Leave them too long and you'll have charcoal. Pull them too early and you'll be chewing paste. But for now, you just hold the dough in your hands, feeling its weight, its pliability. It's warm from your palms, alive in a way that connects you directly to the land. You glance around at the camp children watching curiously, elders nodding in approval, the smell of smoke curling into the air. Everyone knows what comes next. You place the dough gently near the fire, waiting for the coals to settle. The crackling slows the flames dim to glowing red embers. You reach with a stick, scraping a shallow hollow in the ash. The moment feels delicate, almost ceremonial. This is the bridge between raw ingredients and nourishment, between hunger and satisfaction. You're not just mixing flour and water, you're mixing memory, tradition, survival. And as you tuck the dough discs into their ash cradle, covering them lightly, you can't help but wonder how many countless mornings like this have unfolded across tens of thousands of years. The smell will come soon, earthy and smoky, drifting on the breeze. For now, though, it's patience again. You sit back, wiping sticky dough from your hands, and wait for the earth to do its quiet work. The waiting is almost worse than the grinding. You sit cross-legged by the fire pit, eyes fixed on that ash-covered hollow where your dough is slowly transforming. The embers glow red like tiny eyes peeking through grey dust. A faint smell rises, earthy and smoky, and your stomach instantly perks up as if it knows salvation is near. You lean closer, sniffing, half convinced you can already taste it on your tongue. Cooking this way isn't about timers or precision. It's about trust that the ash is hot enough, that the dough is thick enough, that patience will reward you with something edible. You poke the ash lightly with a stick, listening for that hollow thump like tapping on a secret door. Not yet. You lean back again, drumming your fingers on your knee, reminding yourself that rushing will only end in charred disappointment. The technique is ancient yet genius in its simplicity. Without ovens, early Australians buried dough beneath embers, letting the radiant heat surround it. The ash insulated the dough, baking it evenly without open flames. It's called ash baking, and variations of it appear all over the world, from desert nomads to mountain shepherds. But here, in the vast red heart of Australia, it became a daily ritual. Quirky fact for tonight: sometimes dough baked this way picked up little flecks of charcoal, and instead of brushing them off, people actually embraced the flavor. Charred crumbs became part of the dish, like an early form of artisanal smoky crust. If you think your local bakery invented rustic bread, think again. This version has a 65,000-year head start. Historians still argue whether these early bakers saw their ash cakes as bread in the cultural sense, or simply as a convenient way to make seeds chewable. Was it food innovation, or just survival improvisation? Either way, the result is the same warm, filling sustenance, rising from fire and dust. Finally, you decide the time has come. With the stick, you scrape back the ash, uncovering blackened lumps. They look ruined at first, charred, cracked, uneven. You reach in, carefully ignoring the heat, biting at your fingertips, and lift one out. You brush away the loose ash, revealing the surprise inside a soft, steaming interior, pale and tender-smelling, faintly nutty. You tear off a piece, blowing on it before taking a cautious bite. It's chewy, gritty, but undeniably bread. The smoky crust crumbles in your mouth, while the inside clings to your teeth, warm and dense. You chew slowly, savoring the miracle. Against all odds, you've turned grass and water into something that fills your belly and keeps you alive. Around you, others gather closer. Bread isn't just food, it's a moment of sharing. A child tugs at your arm, eager for a bite. An elder accepts a piece, nodding silently in approval. The fire crackles, sparks spiraling into the twilight, while laughter bubbles from the camp. For a brief moment, hunger is forgotten. There's only the taste of ash-baked bread, smoky and grounding, tying everyone to the land beneath their feet. You glance up at the endless sky stars just beginning to pierce the dusk, and you realize this meal is as much ceremony as necessity. Tomorrow you'll grind again. Tomorrow you'll bury more dough in the embers. But tonight, for the first time in hours, you are full. And that fullness feels like triumph. The air is cooler now, the heat of the day fading into the long, soft stretch of night. Around the campfire, you sit shoulder to shoulder with others, the baked loaves resting in a pile between you. They're not uniform, some are cracked, others lopsided. One looks like it barely survived the ash. But none of that matters. Each smoky disc is treasure, the result of hours of effort, patience, and hunger. Hands reach in, breaking the loaves apart. Children giggle as they brush ash off their lips. Elders chew slowly with the satisfaction of long memory. You pass a piece to the person beside you, who passes it along again, and soon the bread has made its rounds. No one hoards, no one counts. This is a food meant for sharing. The taste lingers differently for everyone. To some it's nutty, earthy, like the seeds themselves carry the flavor of the land. To others it's comfort, filling an emptiness in both belly and spirit. For you it's a revelation that something so humble, so raw, could feel like celebration. Quirky tidbits: some early groups actually flavored these breads with bits of roasted yam or native fruits when available, adding sweet bursts to the otherwise plain chew. Think of it as the original fruit and nut loaf, minus the artisan bakery price tag. You can imagine someone biting into a seed cake and grinning at the unexpected tang of wild berry, a small joy in a world of survival. Historians still argue whether bread making in Australia was purely practical, or whether it carried deeper meaning, whether it was ritual tradition or a way of binding communities together. After all, when a food demands hours of labor sharing, becomes part of the recipe. To eat is not only to live, but to belong. Live. The night deepens. The stars multiply overhead, scattered like flour across a black slab of sky. Smoke drifts lazily upward, curling into the constellations. Someone begins a story, their voice rising and falling in rhythm with the crackle of the fire. The children lean closer, eyes wide, crumbs still clinging to their chins. You lean back, chewing slowly, letting the smoky crust melt into your tongue. You can hear laughter, see firelight flickering on familiar faces, and feel the warmth of full bellies all around. For the first time today, there's nothing urgent left to do. The seeds have been gathered, the stones have sung their grinding rhythm, the ash has baked its gift. And so the bread becomes more than survival, it becomes memory, story, and celebration. Tomorrow you'll wake again to hunger and dust, but tonight, beneath the southern sky, you're part of something bigger. You're eating the land itself, transformed by human hands into sustenance and meaning. The fire snaps, sending sparks upward. You lick your fingers, taste the smoke one last time, and smile. This bread, simple, gritty, uneven, is enough. The fire has burned lower now, embers glowing faintly like scattered jewels, yet the camp is still alive with murmurs and laughter. After the bread has been torn and tasted, the real magic unfolds not in the ash pits, but in the sharing. You watch as elders pass pieces to children who nibble carefully at first, then bite boldly, crumbs falling down their chests. Someone cracks a joke and the group bursts into laughter that echoes across the open plain. Bread here isn't plated neatly or guarded in personal portions. It moves hand to hand, each piece carrying the warmth of both fire and friendship. You hold your portion, already missing the rough weight of the dough you'd needed earlier, but now comforted by the knowledge that it feeds not just you, but everyone around. The taste lingers on your tongue, smoky and faintly sweet. The texture is gritty, yet strangely satisfying, and the smell still clings to your fingertips. You lean back, letting your gaze drift upward. The southern sky stretches endlessly above you, sharp with stars. Some constellations you almost recognize, though here they wear different names and meanings. The bread, the fire, the sky, they all weave together into a fabric of belonging. Quirky tidbit. Some groups believed that bread baked this way carried protective power, especially when eaten before a journey. Imagine chewing a hard lump of seed cake and reassuring yourself, yep, this will keep the spirits away. Call it superstition or early energy bar marketing, it worked either way. Historians still argue whether gatherings like this were casual meals or subtle ceremonies. Was every loaf sacred or only those baked in special times? Did people see bread as everyday fuel or as something tied to storytelling, identity, and myth? Scholars debate, but sitting here with crumbs in your lap, it feels obvious that food this laborious naturally became more than just fuel. You glance across the circle at faces lit by firelight. Shadows dance across skin painted with ash and laughter lines. Someone hums softly a rhythm that blends with the crackle of embers. It reminds you of the grinding rhythm earlier in the day, as though the work and the feast are parts of the same song. The children grow drowsy, heads nodding against their mothers' shoulders. Elders continue their quiet conversations, voices low and steady as though the bread has softened not only hunger, but also time itself. You take another bite slower now, stretching it out, letting the smoky crust dissolve gradually. This moment is what the bread was always meant for, not the grinding or the mixing or even the baking, but the sharing. You realize that you're not just eating history, you're participating in it. Every loaf handed around the fire tonight will be remembered in stories or in silence long after the embers cool. The stars glitter overhead, firelight flickers across smiling faces, and you feel it settle deep inside you. Bread binds people together. And here, under this wide sky, you're bound to them too. The bread sits heavy in your belly now, not in a bad way, but with the comforting weight of something real, something earned. You lick the last dusting of ash from your fingers and notice the way the flavor clings, nutty, earthy, faintly bitter, like roasted coffee grounds. It doesn't taste like baguettes or sandwich bread. It tastes like the land itself, as if every bite is a mouthful of soil and sun and seed. The elders around you nod knowingly, as though they too taste the country in every chew. Bread here isn't just food, it's geography you can swallow. Each grain carries the memory of where it grew near the river, in the open grassland, by the dry creek bed. You're eating terrain distilled into texture. Quirky tidbits, some seeds like kangaroo grass gave bread a flavor described by modern bakers as nutty, almost hazelnut-like. Others leaned bitter, demanding either an acquired taste or enough hunger to not care. It's easy to imagine people boasting about which patches of land produced the tastiest loaves, the way we brag today about fancy coffee beans. Historians still argue whether ancient Australians intentionally selected and managed certain grasses to improve flavor, or if they simply accepted whatever the land offered. Was this early crop preference the faint flicker of farming, or was it a matter of taking what you could get, flavor be damned? The evidence is tantalizing but inconclusive. You chew another piece slowly and feel grit between your teeth. Tiny fragments of husk cling stubbornly to the bread, reminding you that perfection was never the point. Instead, the uneven texture becomes part of the experience. The crust scratches your tongue, the center sticks to your molars, and yet somehow it's satisfying in a way modern fluff could never be. The taste ties you to this place, grounding you. The fire smoke swirls the stars overhead, glitter like scattered salt, and you can't help but smile at the thought this is as close as food gets to being an edible map. Each bite whispers, "You are here." Around the fire, others murmur about the flavor, some joking, some thoughtful. A child complains it's too gritty, and laughter ripples through the group. Someone else counters that the smoky crust is the best part, tearing off another chunk with gusto. You realize that bread, even this ancient, already carried the debates and preferences we still argue about today. Crust versus middle plain versus flavored. It all began here with ash and seeds. You lean back, savoring the last of your piece, and breathe deeply. The land tastes alive inside you, and the night seems somehow richer for it. Morning comes again, and with it, the leftovers. You pick up one of the hardened discs from last night's fire, its crust now stiff as a rock. When it was fresh, it was smoky and chewy, but a night in the dry air has turned it into something closer to survival rations than comfort food. Still waste is unthinkable here. Every crumb has value. You take a bite, and your jaw protests immediately. It's tough, gritty, requiring patience and determination. You gnaw at it like a stubborn kangaroo trying to chew through bark. Yet slowly, with enough effort, it softens on your tongue, releasing its same nutty, earthy flavor. It may not be pleasant, but it fills your stomach all the same. The practicality of storage was vital. Bread wasn't always eaten fresh. Some loaves were deliberately baked hard, transformed into travel rations that could last for days. These dense cakes, wrapped in bark or leaves, became companions on long journeys. They might not win any taste awards, but they kept you alive while you walked under an unforgiving sun. Think of them as prehistoric protein bars, minus the chocolate drizzle and glossy branding. Quirky tidbit: in some regions, leftover bread was crumbled and soaked in water again, making a porridge-like mush. Recycling food long before the word leftovers was invented. Imagine waking up to a bowl of soggy, ash-flavored cereal. It might not excite you, but it kept bellies full. Historians still argue whether these preservation techniques count as planned food storage, which would push back the timeline of organized food systems, or whether it was simply improvisation when hunger demanded it. Was there strategy, or just necessity? The line is blurred, but the hardened discs in your hands feel like evidence leaning toward intention. You tuck a few of the tougher loaves into a woven bag. They're not glamorous, but they're portable, sturdy, against time and travel. Later, when the sun beats down and your legs ache, you'll be grateful for each bite, no matter how jaw-breaking it feels. You glance back at the campfire smoke rising faintly from the morning's embers and realize that every loaf tells two stories, one of immediate satisfaction shared around the fire and one of endurance carried silently across the land. Both are essential. Both keep life moving forward. You shoulder the bag, its weight comforting in its promise, and set out once more. Each step kicks up red dust, each breath carries the scent of smoke still clinging to your skin. And as you walk, the tough bread bumps against your side like a reminder. Survival here isn't about luxury, but about cleverness, patience, and always saving a piece for tomorrow. The path stretches long and dusty, and as you chew another piece of that jaw-breaking bread, you start to wonder, was this just a quirky survival trick, or something far bigger? Archaeologists have asked the same question for decades. After all, evidence of grinding stones in Australia is among the oldest on Earth. Some date back 65,000 years. That means people here may have been baking before Egyptians ever dreamed of pyramids, before Mesopotamians scribbled recipes on clay tablets. It's a staggering thought that these smoky discs, tough and simple, might represent the first spark of bakery culture anywhere. Could Australia have been the true birthplace of bread? The evidence tempts many researchers, though not all agree. Historians still argue whether this qualifies as bread in the strict sense. Some insist that without yeast it's just a seed cake, not bread as we know it. Others counter that the act of grinding, mixing and baking in embers is bread in its most primal form. Bread stripped bare of fluff and definition. The debate rages in academic circles, yet here in the dust you don't much care. If it fills your belly, it counts. Quirky tidbit. The grindstones discovered at Cuddy Springs in New South Wales contained traces of starch grains from native grasses. Scientists who studied them suggested they could be the world's earliest evidence of flour. Imagine some proud ancestor pointing at their flour pile and saying, "See, told you we were first." Meanwhile, Egyptians thousands of years later get all the credit with their golden loaves. You gnaw thoughtfully, feeling crumbs stick to your teeth, and let the question settle in your mind. Whether this was the first bread or just one of many early food experiments, it doesn't change the reality. People here mastered a way to make the inedible edible, and that mastery meant survival, meant generations continuing, meant stories told under firelight. You picture those debates happening even then, not in scholarly journals, but around campfires. One person swears the bread tastes better if left longer in the ash. Another claims their grandmother's grinding technique produces smoother flour, and someone else insists the real trick is in the seeds themselves, that only certain patches of land produce the good bread. Different century, same arguments. The outback wind picks up carrying dust across the horizon. You pause watching it blur the line between land and sky and think about the way history is always carried forward, sometimes in books, sometimes in bones, and sometimes in the smoky crust of a humble loaf. Bread here may or may not be the first, but it's undeniably old, undeniably important. And as you chew, swallowing hard against the toughness, you realize that you're not just eating food, you're eating evidence. You're consuming a debate that still hasn't ended and maybe never will. The bread is plain gritty and honest, but who says survival food can't have a little flair? You sit near the fire staring at the next lump of dough in your hands and consider what might happen if you fold something extra into it. Early Australians certainly did. The land is full of flavor if you know where to look. You wander into the scrub eyes, sharp looking for wattle seed. The pods rattle dry in the wind, their tiny seeds hidden inside. You crack one open roller seed between your fingers and smile. When roasted and ground wattle seed smells rich and nutty, almost like coffee crossed with chocolate. You crush a few into your dough, their dark flecks speckling the pale flour. Already, it looks more inviting. Quirky tidbit. Some groups added crushed ants into their mixes, not as a prank, but as a source of tangy flavor and protein. Yes, ant-flavored bread. Call it bush food innovation or call it the world's first attempt at fusion cuisine. Either way, you can't say they weren't bold. You knead your mixture, folding in water, watching the seeds and crumbs blend into a sticky paste. This dough feels more alive than the last, as though it already carries personality. You flatten it into discs again, uneven but promising, and tuck them under the embers, the fire pops smoke curling upward with the scent of roasting wattle seed. Historians still argue whether flavoring bread was deliberate culinary experimentation or simply the byproduct of tossing whatever was available into the mix. Were people chasing taste or just squeezing out every calorie possible? The line between flavor and necessity blurs when survival is at stake. When you pull the new discs from the ashes, the smell hits first smoky, yes, but with a warm undertone, deeper and richer than before. You brush off the dust, tear one open and taste. The wattle seed adds a roasted edge like someone snuck a shot of espresso into your breakfast. It's gritty still, but layered, now complex in a way you didn't expect. You pass pieces around and the reactions ripple across faces. A child grins at the nutty flavor, while an elder nods approvingly, murmuring something about how the seeds remind them of journeys long past. The bread has shifted from mere survival to a tiny moment of joy. Food here is always practical, but it also hints at art. Each addition, wattle seed, berries, even ants, tells a story about curiosity, daring, and the human urge to make something better, tastier, more memorable. Even at the edge of survival, flavor matters. You chew slowly, savoring the smoky, nutty bite, and realize that in this simple act of mixing seeds, you've stumbled into something timeless. This isn't just bread anymore, it's culture written in flavor across your tongue. You sling the woven bag of hardened loaves over your shoulder and start walking. The path stretches out ahead, shimmering in the midday heat, but you know you won't be alone for long. Out here, across the vastness of the land, invisible trails thread between group songlines marked not with road signs but with memory, story, and song. And along those trails, food travels too. Imagine arriving at another camp after days of walking. You're dusty tired, but you open your bag and pull out those tough seed cakes. They may not look impressive, but when shared, they mean more than calories. They're a gesture and offering a link between people who may not see each other often but share the same land and its gifts. Quirky tidbit: in some parts of Australia, seeds and breads were traded alongside ochre tools and even ceremonial songs. Picture it as a prehistoric marketplace where currency wasn't coins, but nourishment, color, and story. Someone might trade a grinding stone groove of flour for a bundle of fresh yams, or swap hardened bread for information about waterholes farther down the track. Historians still argue whether these exchanges were strictly practical trade or something more symbolic were loaves traded as food alone or as tokens of connection and alliance? The ambiguity remains, but the fact is clear: bread moved across the land hand to hand, group to group. You break a piece of your hard ration and offer it to a fellow traveler. They hand you back a different loaf, one flavored with berries you don't recognize. You bite, and suddenly the taste of another region fills your mouth, sweet, tart, sharp against the smoke. In that moment, you're not just eating bread, you're tasting geography, bridging distance through flavor. Around the fire at night, the songs begin. People trace the land with their voices, describing rivers, ridges, and sacred places in melodies that serve as both maps and memory. The bread you chew becomes part of the song's sustenance for the voice that carries it. Each bite fuels another verse, another story, another step in the endless weaving of land and people. The loaves may crumble, the flavors may vary, but the act of exchange is constant. Food is never just food, it's a handshake, a bond, a story carried in your mouth. And as you trade bread under the stars, you feel the connection stretch out across the land, as real and enduring as the songlines themselves. The bread sits heavy in your hands, but tonight it's more than food. The campfire burns, low shadows stretching across the dust, and you notice the way people handle the loaves differently now. There's ceremony in their movements, a reverence that suggests bread is not always just about filling bellies. You watch as one elder breaks a loaf carefully, not to eat, but to place it beside the fire. It's an offering, a gesture to the ancestors, to the spirits of land and sky. The smoke curls upward as if carrying flavor into the night air, delivering gratitude to those who came before. Quirky tidbit: in some traditions, seed cakes were crushed and scattered during certain ceremonies, their fragments meant to nourish not only the living, but the land itself. It's a reminder that food doesn't just sustain people, it feeds the world around them. You think of it as the first compost ritual, long before gardening blogs made it trendy. Historians still argue whether these rituals were universally practiced or varied dramatically across regions. Some evidence suggests bread was part of initiation rites, others hint at funerary practices, and still others believe it was woven into seasonal gatherings. The ambiguity lingers, but the pattern is undeniable: bread meant something. You break off a piece yourself and chew slowly, thinking about how many layers it holds. It's nourishment, yes, but also memory. Each loaf is a link to the land where the seeds were gathered, to the hands that ground them, to the fire that baked them. Eating becomes remembering, and remembering becomes honoring. Voices rise around the fire, not in casual chatter now, but in a rhythm that feels older than the moment. Stories are told of ancestors who walked far, who carried bread as both food and symbol. Some say the act of baking itself is a reminder of resilience, that if you can take hard seeds and turn them into sustenance, you can survive anything. The stars shimmer above, endless and watchful, as bread passes from hand to hand. You feel the weight of it in your palm, heavier than its size should allow. It's carrying history, ritual, and identity all at once. You chew, swallow, and realize that what you're eating is not just bread, it's connection, stretching backward into time and outward across the land. The firelight fades, replaced by the hum of distant highways, the glow of city skylines, and the hiss of espresso machines. Yet the old bread remains echoing in unexpected places. Modern bakers across Australia and even beyond have begun to look back, reviving the traditions of wattle seed loaves and native grass flowers. They fold these ancient flavors into sourdough starters, blending past and present in every slice. You walk into a bakery today and spot wattle seed muffins lined up next to almond croissants. There's lemon myrtle sourdough sitting proudly beside rye. The earthy, nutty taste once pulled from the bush with stone, and sweat now mingles with the tang of fermentation crafted with shiny steel mixers instead of grinding stones. The transformation feels surreal but also strangely inevitable. Quirky tidbits: some artisan bakers joke that wattle seed is Australia's answer to espresso, since it has that roasted, coffee-like flavor when baked. It's a flavor your ancestors would have recognized instantly, though they probably would have laughed at the idea of selling it for $6 a slice. Historians still argue whether this modern revival honors tradition or commodifies it. Is baking wattle seed sourdough in a hipster cafe in Melbourne really the same spirit as grinding seeds on a rock under the desert sun? Some say yes, others bristle at the thought. The debate swirls like flour dust in the air, impossible to settle neatly. But for you biting into a slice of bread speckled with wattle seed, the answer is simpler. It tastes of continuity, of the way flavors survive, adapt, and keep whispering across centuries. Each bite becomes a bridge, carrying the smoky memory of campfires into glass-windowed bakeries where baristas hum and milk frothers hiss. You close your eyes, chew, and the past seeps through. Behind the polished counter and chalkboard menus, you can still taste the outback, the dust, the smoke, the crunch of wild seeds. And you realize that even here, surrounded by cappuccinos and Bluetooth speakers, the bread still carries a story that refuses to fade. Night settles again, and this time you're back by the fire. The city noise has faded, the cafe lights gone. Only the endless outback sky remains, stars spread so wide they feel like they might swallow you whole. In your lap rests a final loaf, still warm from the embers. You tear it slowly, letting the steam drift upward, and breathe in the smoky, nutty scent. The camp gathers close. Children lean against their elders' laughter, fading into murmurs, stories softening into whispers. Bread passes hand to hand, not as a luxury, not as a treat, but as a quiet ritual. Each bite is heavy with meaning. You chew slowly, letting the gritty texture grind between your teeth, letting the earthy taste settle on your tongue. It's plain and simple, yet it carries the weight of ages. You remember the seeds gathered in dry grass, the stones clacking in steady rhythm, the sticky dough folded with creek water, the fire pits glowing at dusk. You remember the tough rations carried across distances, traded along song lines, offered in ceremonies, flavored with wattle seed and even ants. You remember the arguments about what counts as the first bread, and you realize that debates don't matter much when your stomach is full and your heart is steady. Quirky tidbit? Some anthropologists once joked that if you dropped one of those hardened rations on your foot, it might hurt more than it would feed you. You chuckle softly, careful not to break the sleepy quiet of the camp. Historians still argue whether this was the true beginning of bread, or one branch of a wider human experiment scattered across continents. But sitting here watching sparks rise into the night, you feel that the question is less important than the answer you've already tasted. Survival memory connection. The embers glow low, painting your hands in orange light. You lick the last crumbs from your fingers, lean back on the cool earth, and let your eyelids sink heavier and heavier. The bread has filled your stomach, the fire has warmed your bones, and the night has wrapped itself around you like a blanket. The whispers of history drift closer, gentle as the smoke. They curl through the dark, reminding you that every crumb, every ember, every breath you take tonight is tied to a story stretching farther back than stars can count. Now the story slows, the edges softening like dough left to rest. You've walked through dust and fire, chewed gritty bread, traded loaves beneath starlight, and tasted both survival and ceremony. But here, as the last embers fade, there is nothing more to do, just rest. Breathe in long and steady as though you're drawing the smoky air of the outback into your lungs. Let it out slowly, like a sigh that carries away the weight of the day. The campfire is low, glowing faintly, a heartbeat in the darkness. The stars shimmer above, infinite but silent, patient as ever. Your body feels heavy now, like one of those seed cakes, dense, grounded, solid. Every limb drifts closer to stillness. Every thought grows softer, lighter, slipping away like ash carried on the wind. The bread of history, so humble and ancient, has done its work. It has filled your stomach, yes, but also your mind with a sense of connection, a thread binding you to people who lived, laughed, and dreamed under the same stars long before you. Their footsteps echo in your breath, their stories curl in your dreams, their bread lingers on your tongue. So rest now, let the dust settle, let the smoke fade, let the stars hold you as gently as the earth beneath your back. The story isn't over, it never really ends, but for tonight, it's enough. Close your eyes, sink deeper, and let yourself drift into the quiet where history and sleep meet.